Good evening, everyone. We are happy to see you here at today's webinar, organized by the Department of Management and Commerce, Trinity Institute of Professional Studies, and Center for Economic Policy and Research, CEPR. We see around 70 to 80 people have signed in and many more are joining. We are delighted to have amongst us a very distinguished panel to discuss a very important and topical subject, namely changing geopolitics and role of India. Will COVID-19 be a turning point? Friends, as the topic suggests, the ensuing discussion in today's webinar will revolve around the geopolitical and economic impact of COVID-19, and more importantly, about the challenges and opportunities that a dramatically changing world and a new normal presents before India. Post the talk by our invited speakers, we would take up Q&A from the participants as well. Hence, kindly post your questions in the chat box privately to the host. Also, please give your names along with the questions. To begin today's program formally, may I now request Dr. Barkha Behel, Director, Trinity Institute of Professional Studies, to formally welcome everyone and say a few words. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Meenal. Good evening, Mr. Rajat Sethi, Mr. Ashwani Mahajan, Honorable Chairman, Sir Dr. R.K. Tandon, Principal Law Department, Dr. K.K. Geeta, my dear colleagues, and all the participants from Pan India. On behalf of Trinity Institute of Professional Studies, I welcome Mr. Rajat Sethi, who is currently serving as the Principal Advisor to the Chief Minister of Manipur, advising him on issues related to internal security, insurgency, and economic development. Rajat has to internal security, insurgency, and economic development. In addition, he is also an author, and he has co-authored a national bestseller non-fiction book titled The Last Battle of Sarighat, published by Penguin Random House. He is a regular TV commentator on subjects of politics and economics. Rajat is a public policy graduate from the John Kinsley School of Government at Harvard University, a management of MIT Solon School of Management, and a computer science graduate of MIT Kharagpur. I also welcome Mr. Ashwani Mahajan, who is the national co-convener of Swadeshi Jagran Manch, an Indian political and cultural organization. SJM is affiliated to Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. They will be deliberating on the challenges and opportunities India will be facing post-COVID and the changing geopolitics concepts. So in my view, technology and data are two inherently geopolitical issues which play a major role in this changing environment. And what I believe is that, which is what is expected, is that digital equity will require a new framework which will be relating to governance of technology and data that will play beyond geopolitical considerations. So now I welcome them to deliberate on these specific issues and enlighten our participants with their valuable knowledge. I thank Professor Meenal to be the event coordinator for this webinar, and I also thank Dr. R.K. Tandon sir, who has been a motivator and supporter for organizing all such events in the institution. Thank you, Meenal, and now I give it to you.
Friends, we are most honored to have amongst us Shri Ashwani Mahajan ji, Ashwani Mahajan ji is an author, an economist, a professor at Delhi University, and also the national co-convener of the Swadeshi Jagran Manch, an organization that is an affiliate of Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, which has also been very vocal on promoting India's self-reliance. I would request Ashwani ji to share his views on the topic of the webinar, which is a very topical subject, with us. Ashwani sir.
Thank you, Minal. Today we are living in these COVID days, what we call the Chinese virus days, and the whole world now is facing this pandemic, which is causing a lot of health and economic problems for the countries which are most affected, and almost all of the world is affected. But we see after China, the whole of Europe, US, and to some extent India is greatly impacted by this COVID-19, and this is impacting the thinking, the thought process, the strategies of how to really run our economies, how do we make our nations come out of the economic crisis which is being caused by this pandemic. If we see in the much before the pandemic, I would say for the last 3-4 years, there has been a change in the thinking about how the economy should be run. We have seen nearly 29 years of globalization, but in the last 3-4 years of the period which we have seen, the if you see US has been the front runner of globalization. They were the ones, those who pushed the whole world towards this, what you call the globalization, the free trade, free movement of capital, and so on. But when President Trump fought his election, the plank on which he was, fighting election was that he would do something to change the whole scenario so far as the free trade is concerned. And he said, no matter whatever we have done in the past, whatever agreements we have reached, whether it was TPP or it is WTO or anything, we would like to come out of that in the interest of the US, and then started the what we call the trade war between US and China. In the last 20 years, since China has entered into WTO, Indian economy has been the worst hit in the sense that our manufacturing was never in such a bad shape that we were importing almost everything, whatever was being needed in the field of in telecom sector or in electronics, even APIs, even most of the metals, manufactured products. We were basically getting more and more dependent on China. The result of which was that in 2001, whereas our trade deficit was with China was hardly $0.2 billion, which reached around $63 billion by the year 2017-18. But then in 18-19, this was reduced to $53 billion. But the matter of fact is that the trade deficit with China has been increasing, and overall deficit of India's foreign trade has been increasing at an exponential rate. And once it even reached $190 billion, we can understand that the amount of the quantum of commodities which we were importing, in the quantum of or the value of commodities which we were exporting, the difference was too big. And that was in a way an indication that we had been exporting jobs and importing goods. But our policymakers, unfortunately, didn't really realize that what is happening to Indian economy, because we can very well understand that the argument that our economy has been growing at a 7-8% and so on and so forth has been primarily due to the strategy which we had adopted for our economy. That means globalization, and the argument of those who were favoring globalization, the supporters of globalization, has been that we are growing at a much faster rate during after the new economic policy has been adopted, and before that our rate of growth was what we call, even I would say they used to call it a Hindu rate of growth. And they said that since we are growing at a much faster rate, and ultimately our people will be benefited out of it. But actually that didn't happen. And though GDP in numbers has been rising, but the impact of that GDP growth was not reaching the poor masses, the workers, the farmers, and the man on the street. And ultimately what we are seeing today, the plight of workers, which we see on the roads, how what in the shape in which they are. You see, our Prime Minister said that we are giving a package of 20 lakh crores. So that means that our GDP has now reached 200 lakh crores. If we say that our GDP is 200 lakh crores, that means the per capita income in India is 1 lakh, nearly 1,35,000 to 1,40,000 rupees. So in a family of say 5 people, you can very well understand that the family income would be nearly 7 lakh rupees in 1 year. If it is 7 lakh rupees, and it is distributed equally amongst the people, then our workers would not have been in such a bad shape, carrying whatever they have on their heads, and going in whatever way they are going to their villages. This would not have been the case had it been equally distributed. That means this growth has actually not benefited our common man, our workers, our farmers, and so on. And that's the reason why there has been larger scale migration in search of good living. But actually that was not happening. And ultimately we have seen that our workers could not stand even for a few days, and they could not withstand this unemployment being caused by the COVID-19. So we have to really think now beyond those arguments of globalization, because since COVID-19 has appeared, I think most of the supporters of globalization have disappeared, because they don't have any argument now that, that yes, globalization has done good to the people, because we have seen the plight of the people on the streets. And therefore, what we have to really think is that the kind of economic policy which we have adopted in the last 30 years has done really very some much bad than good to the people at large. Uh, if you uh, look at the economic relationship with China, we see that mm, our argument, the argument of the globalization supporters, has been that since we are getting cheaper goods, the consumers are getting benefited. But we see that the kind of growth which has occurred in the last uh, 30 years has actually not benefited the people. And if we, I would not burden you with the data, but I would say that the wages in the factory sector has the money wages have gone up by 7 times, whereas in the same period the prices, the price index has gone up by 6.5 times or even more. So there has hardly been any improvement in the real wages of the people. We see the plight of farmers. There is a gap between the rural incomes and the urban incomes to the tune of 12.3 times, whereas the per capita income in the rural areas, it is 23,000 rupees, and in the per capita income in the urban areas, it is nearly 2,90,000. So if my rural brother is earning 1 rupee, my urban inhabitants are earning 12.3 rupees on an average. We know not all urban people are getting that much of income, and but in general, the rural population is in a very bad shape. So we all those arguments in favor of free trade, which was occurring between India and China, which was actually not which was actually a kind of unfair trade, because China has been dumping goods and our manufacturing has been coming down. So we have to think beyond the uh, cheap goods coming from China. Also, the fact that during these years, a lot of investment has also been coming into India from China. All that helps also. If we go deep into it, we find that China was trying to control our economy in the strategic manner, and they were trying to capture most of the sectors which are strategically important for us. And also the fact that Chinese companies have been taking over Indian companies, maybe startups or the big companies, and the lot of e-commerce has also, there has been a kind of deeper attack on our traders also through the e-commerce companies from China. I'm not saying that. On the other hand, we have been facing troubles also from US, in the sense that two of the US companies are now trying to capture our retail trade. The Amazon and Walmart, they are trying to capture our domestic small trade. If we see the plight of the people on roads, we can very well understand that we need to do something to come out of this crisis. And when we try to rethink that how can we really what we can do to come out of this problem of the poverty of the people, to come out of the problem of the plight of the farmers and the kind of and the rural crisis and the rural unrest, we
we now have to really think in terms of solving this issue. We understand that this virus has come from China, and which is impacting India. But we must understand that from 1991, the real virus has entered into India. That was in the thinking of the policymakers, because they tried to take our economy on the lines of globalization, on the path of globalization, which was not actually suiting Indian economy. अब अगर हम देखें कि इस सारे कालखंड में हमने क्या खोया और क्या पाया, तो देखते हैं कि हमारी इंडस्ट्री मैन्युफैक्चरिंग जो है वो लगभग खत्म हो गई। आज हमारे यहाँ APIs नहीं बनते हैं। एक जमाना था कि जब हम 1991 में हमारी फार्मास्यूटिकल इंडस्ट्री काफी अच्छी चलती थी, काफी हद तक 2001 तक भी अच्छी चलती रही, लेकिन बाय द ईयर 2001 उसके बाद से जो परिवर्तन आए और चाइना ने ग्लोबल WTO में मेंबरशिप ले ली, उसके बाद से उनकी जो डंपिंग हुई। एक जमाना था उस समय कि हमारा API जो है 90% हम खुद बनाया करते थे और 10% API हम इंपोर्ट करते थे। Today we are importing nearly 90% of the APIs and producing hardly 10% of the APIs ourselves. So that we can understand the kind of dependence on China we have in case of the pharmaceutical products. If we see the electronic sector, we hardly make any electronic products. We hardly make any telecom products. We are totally dependent. Some people ask me when I, as an activist of Swadeshi Jagan, people keep asking me, कौन सा मोबाइल फोन हम ले सकते हैं, कौन सा मोबाइल फोन भारत में बनता है? So obviously, most of the time we are speechless about it. The reason is that our economy, our policymakers never thought of creating capacities with regard to telecom and with regard to the electronics. So, if we look at other sectors, again in chemicals, again because of the dumping, our capacity, we are using much less than our installed capacity, and generally we are dependent on Chinese chemicals. The reason is that our industry is not really able to compete with the dumping coming from China. Apart from dumping, they are using other illicit practices like under invoicing and other things. So even the governments, they were not rising to the occasion, and they also didn't think of really putting our manufacturing to the right path. लेकिन कुछ बदलाव हुआ 2017-18 में, कुछ सोच बदलनी शुरू हुई, और वो इसलिए बदलनी शुरू हुई कि चाइना का जो एटीट्यूड था इंडिया के प्रति, आज भी हम देख रहे हैं कि बॉर्डर में टेंशंस चाइना ने खड़ी की हुई है। उस समय से भी कुछ बॉर्डर की टेंशंस थी, कुछ चाइना का पाकिस्तान को मदद थी, और कुछ सब लोग देख रहे थे कि हमारी इंडस्ट्री लगभग चाइना ने खत्म कर दी है। तो उस समय एक पब्लिक अपराइजिंग हुई और उसमें स्वदेशी जागरण मंच ने एक बड़ी भूमिका रखी, और हमने पूरे देश भर में एंटी चाइना कैंपेन शुरू किया। उसके बाद गवर्नमेंट में भी सोच में भी बदलाव आया, और हम देखते हैं कि फरवरी 2018 में गवर्नमेंट ने पहली बार ये कहा कि यस, वी आर गोइंग टू इम्पोज प्रोटेक्टिव टैरिफ। In the last 28 years of globalization, no government could gather courage to say that we are imposing the tariffs for protection of domestic industry. क्योंकि प्रोटेक्शन तो ऐसा शब्द हो गया था कि जैसे पता नहीं प्रोटेक्शन कर रहे हैं तो बहुत बड़ा अपराध कर रहे हैं, बहुत बड़ा क्राइम कर रहे हैं। नॉट ओनली दैट, गवर्नमेंट इम्पोज्ड tariffs, higher tariffs on telecom and electronics. They also imposed tariffs, higher tariffs on they started imposing tariffs on textiles. जुलाई और अगस्त में 2 बार टेक्सटाइल्स पर टैरिफ बढ़ाया गया और फिर अक्टूबर में एक बार फिर नॉन एसेंशियल कमोडिटीज पर भी टैरिफ 10% से 20%. So with all those hike in tariffs, उसके कारण हमारी चाइना से इंपोर्ट थोड़े कम होने शुरू हो गए. यही नहीं, हमने एंटी डंपिंग ड्यूटीज भी खूब लगाई. 140 आइटम पर एंटी डंपिंग ड्यूटीज लगाई, 100 आइटम जिसमें से चाइना की थी. इसके अलावा हमने बहुत सारे स्टैंडर्ड्स भी इम्पोज करने शुरू किए, जिसकी वजह से हमारा हमने क्रैकर्स का इंपोर्ट लगभग बैन कर दिया. प्लास्टिक इंपोर्ट बैन हो गए काफी हद तक. टॉयज का इंपोर्ट कम हो गया. और भी प्रोडक्ट्स में हमें, चाहे वो केमिकल्स से, मेटल्स में, सब जगह हमें बेनिफिट हुआ. और इसके अलावा रेसिप्रोसिटी क्लॉज भी इन्वोक की ताकि the sectors in which China was not allowing our companies to come in, we imposed reciprocity clause in that. So what I feel is कि अभी जितना सब कुछ हो रहा था और अब जो कोविड के कारण हुआ, दुनिया भर में एक सोच भी बदली है. चाइना ने पूरी दुनिया को इस मुसीबत में तो फंसाया ही. हो सकता है कि कॉन्स्पिरेसी भी हो, लेकिन अगर कॉन्स्पिरेसी न भी हो तो जिस तरह से WHO ने और चीन ने दुनिया को गुमराह किया इस कोविड-19 के केस में, ये स्पष्ट हो गया है कि अब चीन के रिलेशंस रेस्ट ऑफ द वर्ल्ड के साथ वैसे नहीं रहेंगे जैसे पहले हुआ करता. वैसे ही इंपोर्ट खुले तौर पर नहीं हो पाएगा जैसे पहले हुआ करता. पहली बार हुआ कि यूरोपियन कंट्रीज में से किन्हीं लोगों ने चाइना के माल को वापस भेजा. भारत ने भी चाइना के माल को वापस भेजा. भारत में चाइना की हुआवी कंपनी के अगेंस्ट बहुत पहले से ही काफी ऑपोजिशन है. स्वदेशी जागरण में भी उसको अपोज किया, लेकिन somehow our decision makers were not really sensitized on those issues, and the same thing was happening in the other parts of the world also. For example, UK, they disregarded US advice about rolling out of 5G from rolling out of 5G by Huawei. But after the COVID-19, UK has taken the decision not to go ahead with the arrangement with the Huawei company. The way in which now US President is talking, I was listening to his speech recently, the way in which he is talking, the way in which the whole of Europe is talking about, the way in which Japan has now started helping its companies relocating out of China, the way American companies are also trying to relocate out of China, and the European companies and other companies from the other parts of the world, we see that the economic condition of China is not going to be the same. The economic relations with China is not going to be the same. We may have diplomatic relations with China, but economic relations are definitely going to get a big dent. So this is giving us an opportunity to the rest of the world also to reboot the system, because the virus which had come in 1991 in the form of LPG, now it's a time that we try to, as you know, whenever there is a virus in the computer, we shut down the computer and then reboot it. So it's the time to reboot the Indian economy on the lines of self-reliance, on the lines of the Swadeshi, on the lines of rebuilding our industrial capacities, on the lines of whatever we were not able to do earlier. For example, the protection of domestic industry, for example, the reservation of small scale industry, for example, the production of APIs by ourselves, in terms of stopping China from investing into our companies, as we have already done in case of after China's attempt to invest in HDFC. Though the investment was very little, but that has also sensitized the governments. About the 5G from Huawei, or the capital, the merchant capital coming from the China into our startups or into our other companies. आज समय आ गया है कि हम अभी जो कुछ भी हमारे इकोनॉमिक रिलेशंस, चाहे वो चाइना के साथ या यूएस के साथ, यूएस अगर हम चाइना को कहते हैं कि उसके कारण हमारी इकोनॉमी को काफी नुकसान हुआ है, तो यूएस के कारण भी हुआ है। इसलिए हमें डाटा प्रोटेक्शन के बारे में, हमें आईपीआर के बारे में, इंटेलेक्चुअल प्रॉपर्टी के बारे में, हमें पब्लिक हेल्थ के बारे में, हमें अपने रूरल डेवलपमेंट और एग्रीकल्चरल डेवलपमेंट के बारे में एक बार रुकना पड़ेगा, एक बार पुनर्विचार करना पड़ेगा और अपने सिस्टम को रीबूट करके let us now work on, move on more a self-reliant economy, an economy where we are not extra dependent on the rest of the world, extra dependent on China and US. Let us work on the principles of our protection of data, principle of we have also understood the importance of public health, how best we can do this stage of COVID-19. People were saying that our expenditure on public health is too little as compared to the rest of the world, as compared to the European countries. But with the good governance, we could avert the worst which could have been possible due to this. But we have seen how our country has responded to the crisis as compared to the US, as compared to the Europe. Now is the time, and there is a Prime Minister's call also, कि आत्मनिर्भर भारत बनाना है, और उस आत्मनिर्भर भारत में हमारे गांव भी आत्मनिर्भर बनेंगे, हमारे उद्योग भी आत्मनिर्भर बनेंगे, और हम पब्लिक हेल्थ में या व्यापार में इसमें भी आत्मनिर्भर बनेंगे। और वे लोग जो ये कहते हैं कि हम आत्मनिर्भर नहीं बन सकते हैं क्योंकि हमारे पास टेक्नोलॉजी नहीं है, कोई लोग जो कहते हैं कि हम आत्मनिर्भर नहीं बन सकते हैं क्योंकि हमने पहली, दूसरी, तीसरी इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन में पीछे रह गए। हमारा ये कहना है कि अगर हम एक बार में 104 सैटेलाइट्स को अंतरिक्ष की कक्षा में स्थापित करके दुनिया को चकित कर सकते हैं। अमेरिका जो अपने आप को स्पेस में सुपर पावर कहता था, आजकल हमारे पास आते हैं कि आप ही सस्ता दाम पर अंतरिक्ष की कक्षा में सैटेलाइट्स को स्थापित कर देते हैं। जब हम एटम बम बना सकते हैं, जब हम मिसाइल बना सकते हैं, इतना प्रिसीजन जो है वो बिना वजह से नहीं आता है, बाय फ्लूक नहीं आता है। इसलिए अगर हम एटम बम बना सकते हैं, PSLV बना सकते हैं, अगर हम चंद्रयान बना सकते हैं, मंगलयान बना सकते हैं, अगर हमारे जो साइंटिस्ट हैं, जो हमारे बालक हैं, वो पूरी दुनिया भर के लिए सॉफ्टवेयर बना सकते हैं, तो कंप्यूटर चिप बनाना कोई बहुत बड़ी बात नहीं है। केवल सरकारी नीतियों का सरकार की नीयत का फर्क होता है, और ऐसा लगता है कि सरकार भी उसी रास्ते पर चल रही है। तो मुझे लगता है कि COVID-19 is giving us an opportunity to reboot our system, and I hope the future is ours. Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity. Thank you, Meena.
Wow, sir, I couldn't thank you enough. You have given us perspective on why self-reliance is the only way to go for it. Thank you very much, sir. I am sure that everybody enjoyed your address. And now, wish to have among us Dr. R.K. Tandon, Honorable Chairman Tips. I would request him to now kindly address the gathering.
Good evening, one and all present. It was very nice listening to you, Shri Ashwani Mahajan ji, and really we learned a lot. And sir, certainly with your thoughts, new things will come up. And in absentia, I give my sincere gratitude to Jayant Sinha ji, Honorable Member Parliament, Lok Sabha and Chairperson Standing Committee on Finance and Member of PAC. He has sent his video, his words of wisdom, and I think Professor Meenal will be playing it in the end of this webinar. I am told that we have with us today Shri Rajat Sethi ji, Principal Advisor to Chief Minister Manipur, and Mr. Sethi has authored many books as well. So I welcome Mr. Sethi as well. And we have today with us Shri Subhash Sharma ji, Director CEPR, and I welcome him as well. So today's topic is a very unique topic, and I can say that it is a trending topic, that what was there in geopolitics and in power before COVID, and the impact of COVID on these two things. So I would like to say that even before COVID, there was a Cold War between the China and the US. Undoubtedly, US is a superpower army and in military base, and we can say the China was emerging as the superpower in economy, and certainly this COVID has impacted China, because you all know that many countries are blaming that it is due to China that the entire world is suffering from novel coronavirus. And it is very much there in news that this was not disclosed by China timely to the world, that this virus is there, and the rest of the world can also have a hit of this virus due to the outburst of this virus in China. And it is also in the news that the World Health Organization has supported China in hiding this, fact. So US has taken back grants from World Health Organization, and it is US is out of now World Health Organization. The time was given to World Health Organization by the US, around 30 days was given. Now US is taking back all its grants from World Health Organization due to this, hide game with China. So the industries also have been called back by the US from the China, and many countries also will call back their industries from the China, and such factories, industries will be settled in other countries of Asia where labor is cheap. Our country is one of such countries where labor is cheap. So out of this COVID impact, we may be getting mileage in getting a number of industries in our nation, and if such industries they come, then the jobs will be created, infrastructure will be made, and certainly our people will be benefited due to coming of such industries in India. We have other speakers as well, so I shall not take much more time. There are many things to discuss today, to talk over, but we have very prominent speakers with us. So all of us would like to listen them. So it is over to Professor Meenal to please invite the eminent speakers of this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, sir. I'm told Dr. Subhash Sharma, Director of CEPR, has to leave for some due to some prior commitment. So I would request him to just kindly say a few words and address the gathering. Over to you, Dr. Subhash Sharma ji.
थैंक यू मीनल, सबका बहुत स्वागत है और विशेष रूप से टंडन जी का बहुत धन्यवाद जिन्होंने इतना अच्छा वेबिनार ऑर्गेनाइज किया है। और अश्विनी महाजन जी तो हमारे मित्र भी हैं। मैं सिर्फ 2-3 मिनट ही लूंगा क्योंकि हमने रजत सेठी जी को भी सुनना है। अश्विनी जी, आपको याद होगा कि 3 साल पहले देश की सबसे बड़ी पत्रिका ने एक कवर स्टोरी छापी थी, स्वदेशी योद्धा। उसमें अश्विनी जी की भी फोटो थी और 4-5 संगठनों की फोटो थी, और उसके टाइटल में उन्होंने लिखा था फ्रिंज एलिमेंट्स। और ये बात कही थी कि ये जो फ्रिंज एलिमेंट्स हैं ये मोदी सरकार को रिफॉर्म्स करने से रोक रहे हैं, उनको आगे बढ़ने से रोक रहे हैं, ऐसी पूरी कवर स्टोरी थी। उसी पत्रिका ने अब फिर से एक कवर स्टोरी की है जिसमें उसने लिखा है कि सेल्फ रिलायंट भारत और स्वदेशी यही इस देश का फ्यूचर है। जो इस बातों को लोग आज से कुछ साल पहले तक पुरातनगामी कह रहे थे कि ये देश को 16वीं शताब्दी में ले जाना चाहते हैं, स्वदेशी की बात करके, आत्मनिर्भरता की बात करते, आज वही विचार न सिर्फ भारत बल्कि दुनिया के सब देशों का मुख्य विचार बन गया है। ये विचार की ताकत होती है, ये भारत के विचार की ताकत है, स्वदेशी की ताकत है। और मैं बधाई देना चाहता हूं अश्विनी जी को जो पिछले 20 साल से इस विचार को लेकर के पूरा युद्ध लड़ रहे हैं। और अश्विनी जी, आपका आवाज अकेली होती थी, फिर हम कुछ लोगों की आवाज हुई, आज वो पूरी दुनिया की आवाज बन गई है। मैं सिर्फ 4 बातें बताना चाहता हूं जो मुझे लगता है कि आने वाले समय में पूरी दुनिया की अर्थव्यवस्था में होने वाली हैं। पहली बात जिसको अश्विनी जी ने कहा था, मैं अंडरलाइन कर रहा हूं, पूरी दुनिया में अब ग्लोबल सप्लाई चेन्स जिसको कि चाइना ड्राइव कर रहा था पिछले कुछ सालों से, अब वो कमजोर पड़ेंगी और लोकल सप्लाई चेन्स को स्ट्रेंथन करने की बात आज दुनिया के सब देश कर रहे हैं। इसलिए लोकल मैन्युफैक्चरिंग को स्ट्रेंथन करना, लोकल सप्लाई चेन को स्ट्रेंथन करना, जिसको हम शुरू से कहते रहे हैं कि डिसेंट्रलाइज होनी चाहिए इकोनॉमी, डिसेंट्रलाइज होनी चाहिए मैन्युफैक्चरिंग। आज पूरी दुनिया उस बात को मान रही है और पोस्ट कोविड आप देखेंगे कि डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन और बढ़ेगी, विकेंद्रीकरण और बढ़ेगा। दूसरी बात, WTO अब कमजोर पड़ रहा है, पहले से ही कमजोर है। 2008 के बाद से कोई बड़ा समझौता WTO के तहत नहीं हुआ। इसके बाद अब WTO जो है लगभग मृतप्राय हो जाएगा, उसकी रेलेवेंस बिल्कुल खत्म हो जाएगी। और आप देखेंगे कि बाइलेटरल एग्रीमेंट्स और रीजनल एग्रीमेंट्स अब इनका दौर आएगा और ये भारत के लिए एक बहुत एडवांटेज की स्थिति होगी। इसी दिशा में भारत को भी और पूरी दुनिया को अब आगे बढ़ना है। ग्लोबलाइजेशन इस प्रेजेंट स्वरूप में, इस प्रेजेंट फॉर्मेट में अब नहीं चलेगी। अब 2 ही रास्ते हैं ग्लोबलाइजेशन के लिए, या तो दुनिया फिर से डीग्लोबलाइजेशन की ओर बढ़े या फिर रीग्लोबलाइजेशन की ओर बढ़े, यानी कि ग्लोबलाइजेशन एक नए चेहरे के साथ सामने आए। जैसा कि मैंने पहले ही कहा, डिसेंट्रलाइज्ड इकोनॉमी, उस तरह से ग्लोबलाइजेशन अपने आप को चेंज करे। तीसरी बात जो मुझे लगती है कि अब जैसे मैंने आप पहले ही कहा, डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन होगी, WTO कमजोर हो गया है, तो अब मूवमेंट ऑफ लेबर भी रिस्ट्रिक्ट होगा। हम देख रहे हैं वीजा रिजीम स्ट्रिक्ट हो रहे हैं सभी देशों के। मूवमेंट ऑफ कैपिटल भी उस तरह से फ्री नहीं हो पाएगा और मूवमेंट ऑफ गुड्स भी पहले जितना फ्री नहीं होगा। लेकिन एक चीज जो बढ़ेगी जिसमें भारत को बहुत एडवांटेज हो सकता है, इंफॉर्मेशन का फ्लो पहले से ज्यादा बढ़ेगा, नॉलेज शेयरिंग पहले से ज्यादा बढ़ेगी। सो हम इसका एडवांटेज लेकर के अपने देश में सेल्फ रिलायंट होने के लिए टेक्नोलॉजी भी डेवलप कर सकते हैं और उस तरह से आगे भी बढ़ सकते हैं। तो ये पूरी दुनिया में मुझे लगता है तीसरी बड़ी डेवलपमेंट इसके बाद होने वाली है। और जो आखिर की एक बात मैं कहना चाहता हूँ वो ये है कि इसका जो इम्पैक्ट है पूरा इस पूरे सिनेरियो का, वो 2008 के फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस से भी ज्यादा बड़ा इम्पैक्ट है। क्योंकि और इसके कारण से आप देखेंगे जो वेस्टर्न इकोनॉमीज है, जो डेवलप्ड इकोनॉमीज हैं, वो अब और कमजोर होंगी और जो टिल्ट है स्केल का वो अब वेस्ट से फिर से ईस्ट की ओर आएगा। अब जितनी भी प्रेडिक्शंस देख रहे हैं, भले ही हम चाइना को अभी अश्विनी जी भी कह रहे थे उसको बहुत बड़ा सेटबैक लगने वाला है, लेकिन इसके बावजूद चाइना की इकोनॉमी उतनी इफेक्ट नहीं होने वाली है, भारत जल्दी इससे और उभरेगा। सो इस स्थिति में मुझे लग रहा है कि फिर से बैलेंस जो है वो ईस्ट की ओर टिल्ट होने वाला है अगले कुछ सालों में। सो ये पूरा एक सिनेरियो बन रहा है। तो जो बातें इंडियन इकोनॉमिक थॉट जो लगातार कहता रहा है, पूरी दुनिया अब उस दिशा की ओर बढ़नी शुरू होगी और भारत के लिए ये बहुत एक एडवांटेज की स्थिति हो सकती है। हमें लेकिन 3 चीजें तुरंत करने की जरूरत है। जो भी इंडस्ट्रियल पॉलिसी की हम वेट कर रहे हैं, बहुत सालों से नहीं आ पा रही है, मुझे लगता है बहुत जल्दी भारत को अपनी नई इंडस्ट्रियल पॉलिसी लेके आनी चाहिए। लेबर रिफॉर्म्स, लैंड रिफॉर्म्स, इन सब चीजों पर अब जल्दी से काम करने की जरूरत है ताकि जो एक नई तरह का वैश्वीकरण पूरी दुनिया में खड़ा होगा, भारत उसमें एडवांटेज की स्थिति में रहे। बस यही बात मुझे कहनी थी। समय बहुत कम है और हमने अभी रजत सेठी जी को भी सुनना है और बहुत सारे स्पीकर्स को भी सुनना है। एक बार फिर से आप सबका धन्यवाद, विशेष रूप से टंडन जी का, मीनल जी का, अश्विनी महाजन जी का और रजत सेठी जी का बहुत धन्यवाद कि आप सब लोग इस वेबिनार में हमारे साथ जुड़े। धन्यवाद।
Thank you so much, sir. Now, I'm extremely pleased to welcome Mr. Rajat Sethi. Mr. Rajat Sethi, alumnus of IIT Kharagpur, Harvard University, and MIT, is presently advising the Chief Minister of Manipur on issues related to insurgency, internal security, and economic development. As Director Ma'am also told, he has co-authored a national bestseller book, The Last Battle of Sarai Ghat. Rajat is a regular on national TV channels like NDTV and debates on political and economic issues. He's one of my favorite debaters, and I welcome Mr. Rajat and request him to present his views on the subject. Over to you, Mr. Rajat.
Thank you, Dr. Meenal. Namaskar to all of you, and especially to Shri Ashwini Mahajan ji, who has been at a very interesting battle of sorts, and he has led it from the forefront. So I will not delve into some of the very important perspectives that Dr. Mahajan had already highlighted, but I will take you back and try and explain what are the long arch perspectives on globalization, how they have taken shape and how they have transformed China. If you remember, after the disintegration of USSR, there was this urge of a lot of commentators in the West, when there's, especially led by Francis Fukuyama, when he started challenging the notion of the current setup of a bipolar world, and he said that we have decisively entered into a unipolar world with a lot of multilateral organizations finally taking primacy, and this will be the end of history as we know it. Now, clearly, we all know that the Bretton Woods institutions infrastructure came into being around the World War, and they never saw any kind of a significant global stage role for the next 30, 40 years, predominantly because the world was entangled in a Cold War with the USSR on one side and US on the other side. But what happened was, immediately after that, because of the certain commentators and certain ideologues in the West, a dogmatic position was adopted by the West. The dogmatic position wherein they started believing that we have entered decisively into a global order, wherein an open, free trade oriented, liberal global order is the future of the world. And only that order can emancipate crores and crores of poor people from the trap of poverty and bring them above the poverty line. Now, any kind of notion, historically speaking, any kind of notion which is led by dogmas, led by certain set of strong ideology, have always face certain important tests of time. In the long order of the global affairs, ultimately, if you see, liberal order just stood for 3 decades, the 90s, the 2000s, and 2010s. So only 3 decades it could survive. So that dogma itself failed. Now we are foreseeing that there are newer ideas, which is again being propounded by the West, primarily driven by their own current interest. That see, the current global order, as we have all seen, is going to collapse, is going to get over. Now we need to devise something else. But in this process, we need to keep in mind what ultimately serves the interest of the nation is the self-interest. Self-interest has to be the only operative ideology of nations when they are approaching problems to address both within and outside the boundaries, so to say. Now, as we know, China never dogmatically or from principles opposed globalization, because China was the biggest benefactor of globalization. They gained enormous amount of resources. They pulled out innumerable number of people from the clutches of poverty and firmly thrusted the country on a trajectory that had COVID-19 not happened, then by 2030, Chinese GDP would have been world's #1 GDP. It would have bypassed even the American economy by a good margin. By 2030, even India has also been beneficiary of certain aspects of globalization, would also have thrusted its position from the current 5th level or the 6th level on the PPP basis of GDP, right bang on top at the #3. So the pecking order would have been like China on the top, US at #2, and India at #3 by 2030. However, COVID-19 has altered a lot of these projections that were made. People and analysts still believe that this order will stay the same, but instead of 2030, it will perhaps take 5 more years, wherein China will topple the US. Why this is important is we need to really understand how did China defeat the #2 curse. Usually there is a curse that anybody who has been on #2 in the global pecking order of power dynamics or economic might, has always eventually faltered. #2 has rarely been able to replace #1. If you look at the World War I time, during that time, Germany had very strongly positioned itself as the world #2. But we all know that even with all the Bismarckian era antiques that Germany wanted, they could never beat that day's UK, United Kingdom. Then came another phase wherein we saw Japan in the post-World War scenario occupying the #2 position. And we know how Japanese story disintegrated in the next 30, 40 years. And by 90s, that story was all over. China then found itself in that #2 position. But China was very careful. China, when they realized that we are getting into that similar trap, we need to look at what our strengths were. Chinese thinkers clearly realized that it is their size, the sheer size of their economy, which will act as a significant hedge against any kind of threats from the established powers to dethrone China or remove China from its trajectory of success. So whenever there was any kind of push in the past 2-3 decades with regards to its capital controls, currency controls, China suddenly started looking inwards, catered to the domestic demand, really safeguarded its industry, and went out of the way in terms of subsidizing exporters and distorting the global market and distorting the free trade. But largely speaking, the music was on, the musical chair where people were running around those chairs, and suddenly came COVID and the music stopped. And there were 2-3 countries or regions perhaps, which found that they were left high and dry. One such country was, of course, US, which believed that they have been ripped apart by Chinese export aggression for all these decades. And they kept, Donald Trump kept pointing fingers at the previous presidents. They did not do enough to control the enormous export-oriented appetite that the dragon had. but there was no point cribbing. So therefore, he was the one who took decisive actions and understood how the underbelly of the US was thinking. The underbelly of US for the past 3 decades has found itself in such desperately helpless conditions that all their Midwest area jobs from the auto sector vanished, their mining sector jobs vanished, their steel sector, even tech was starting to get threatened because of Chinese advancement. So clearly we see that US realized, but simultaneously what happened was in Europe, we saw a complete meltdown around the Euro vision. A lot of liberals proposed and were very dogmatically associated that yes, Euro can survive in the setup that that was being envisaged in late of the 1990s and during that decade. However, we know how the core economies in Europe, which included Germany, which included the Nordic countries, etc., dominated the narrative within Europe. And all the periphery economies, which includes the PIGS nation, which is Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Greece, all of them suffered. All of them suffered because the conditions that were laid out were not even, were not fair. On one hand, Germany started growing in actually leaps and bounds, whereas the other countries who were on the periphery kept going back and back. There was never an even playing field for any kind of national players in the Euro setup. So we observed that the UK realized this really quickly, and we saw a huge upsurge, a nationalistic upsurge in Europe, in UK, whereby the decision for Brexit was unanimously adopted by the parliament. And UK decided that we'll walk out of this Euro deal, which is essentially skewed towards the current European powers. And it was not a level playing field. So even that dream faltered. A lot of the Bretton Woods institutions, as we know it now, which includes the World Bank, the IMF, they were all essentially either controlled by the US on one side or were controlled by the Europe and European powers. We saw that once both these setups started crumbling, their power started crumbling, these multilateral organizations, which were essentially power broking for these two powers or power centers, started losing their own relevance. Therefore, as Subhashji just highlighted, World Trade Organization started losing its relevance because it no longer suited the interests of their masters, which were the American interests or the European interests. On the other hand, we have seen how IMF has largely been an entity which has never helped developing country without strangulating them with conditionalities on the debt that they give, and it's basically a sovereign takeover which IMF has routinely adopted with various economies. For instance, the Argentinian economy, and right now they are actually doing it with Turkey as well. Then we realized that there was this in 2010, 8, 9, 10, because of the global financial crisis, whereas the West was left behind was the emerging economy, especially the BRICS economy. And that word was coined around that time because they believed that now it is the time when the emerging economies like India, China, Brazil, Russia, etc., will now lead from the forefront, will help and further push the interests of the West in a way that it's not a classic zero-sum game between the emerging markets on one side and the established powers on the other side, but it was certainly seen as a way of a symbiotic relationship. Over time, we know that BRICS as a story has now disintegrated officially. We know Brazil, it is in deep problems, deep structural problems, plus the leadership there hasn't lived up to the expectations of the country. We know Argentina is on the 9th defaulting time right now. It's just about to default yet again. Turkey, we know that Turkish lira is currently crumbling under the pressure of IMF and some of its borrowers. We also know that Russia and a lot of African economies which were oil dependent, all of these oil dependent economies and resource dependent economies have suddenly started faltering because the prices of all of these commodities have clashed. It was on a slashing trajectory, and then COVID happened, and COVID further made things worse for these commodities. But out of all the economies, it was only India, which perhaps was a ray of hope for the West also, which they believe that they can take China head on because India would act as a hedge towards their interests. However, we know there are two possible interests that I have seen from my experience in the West. There are highly self-interested American companies who work as these profit-maximizing entities who don't care about these larger meta-narratives or larger national interest-based theories. They have continued to serve the Chinese interest for a very long time, as long as it was less expensive for them to produce there and bring the goods back to the US, and only worry about the value-added aspect. The significant intellectual property and the value add that comes from the intellectual property was essentially what was driving the US in that scenario. However, China was also constantly looking as to how is the world evolving around it. What China was, China has a very interesting strategy. China got independence in 1949, or basically when the communists took over China in 1949, they came out with a 100-year plan. Can you imagine? I mean, in India, led by the first Prime Minister Pandit Nehru, we've always been trapped in a 5-yearly cycle. 5-yearly cycle because it coincides with the 5-year government that we have. Nobody in India ever thought about those long horizons that perhaps China was looking at. When they in 1947 designed a 100-year plan, of course, that 100-year plan would be meaningless because a lot of things change and a lot of things are dynamic in that plan. But a plan cannot be the enemy of planning. At least they were putting their brains behind how does the country, what are the aspirations of the country, how do we take it forward? One thing that they realized is, and they kept aggressively pushing it, that the Chinese national interest should not come out in the open. Essentially what they wanted was that we do not want to expose our national interest to the world. This strategy in China is called hide and bide. That we will hide our ambitions and keep biding and keep sucking the world of the resources and keep becoming stronger and richer as a nation. And when the right time comes, the dragon will unleash its ambition on the world. Now, in this COVID scenario, a lot of the planning the Chinese had went for a toss. And instead of, and the current leadership is itself finding itself in such a fix that they are not able to understand that should they assert their national ambitions at this stage? Is this stage the adequate time for them to assert that they want to be the #1 power and they want the world order to run according to their system? Or should they further wait, further build their capacities, further suck all the benefits of globalization before they come out in the open? So this is the struggle that China and the Chinese Congress, which recently met, a lot of commentators are thinking around this. Is what China is doing, is it going the right strategy or not? Finally, what has happened on the India story, and this is where things get a little more complex, is that India, for a very long time, was on the periphery of the beneficiaries of globalization. Our first big advantage came in because of the IT revolution. IT sector gave hopes that India could be the tech leader of the world. India could decisively take that leadership, wherein the US and the West, basically, all the technology demands could be met domestically. However, we know that with increasing artificial intelligence, with jobs drying up and robotics taking over our BPO, KPO kind of jobs, we found that we were lagging behind in terms of constantly being ahead of the curve. We lost track somewhere around the UPA days when the country, instead of looking for the next big strategic move, which could have been, as Ashwini ji highlighted, it could have been the APIs of the healthcare. India could have taken its IT revolution to the next trajectory and brought in a healthcare revolution where India would have been the home to the world's healthcare needs. That would have itself unleashed crores and crores of jobs. and would have brought India's growth trajectory further forward. However, what happened was that because of certain strategic neglect in terms of what should be our growth trajectory, we started floundering on various, various agendas, not focusing on sector by sector, specifically looking at our competitive advantage. As a result of this, as we stand today, there are very few sectors where we will have a competitive advantage to outcompete and outmaneuver all our trade competition. Ashwini ji said that, see, when we are building satellites, what can we not build? That is very true. We can build anything in the world. However, what is critical in trade is the price point. Can we bring and build those quality products at a sufficiently lower price point so that it can meet the needs of the world, as China has been successfully doing so? That is where the critical aspect comes in. What has happened is, because of the enormous pressure, we know that every year 12 million or 1 crore 20 lakh people are added to the unemployment pool in this country. The pressure because of unemployment is so severe that a lot of our politicians are bound to think in terms of immediate result orientedness and address the problem that is there. Now, with COVID, we know that ILO has given various projections that around 20 crore people will fall back into the poverty line. Around 2 crore MSMEs will actually close shops. They will never be able to come out of this COVID crisis. We also know that there will be a massive unemployment, at least for the next couple of years. In this scenario, India has to look and rethink what are the long-term objectives that the country has. What is my 5-year, 10-year, 20-year goals? And when Prime Minister Modi talks about Atmanirbharta, we as Atmanirbhar Indians also have to, take part in this brainstorming exercise. We also have to understand what are the strategic priorities of our country. If it is healthcare, what aspects of healthcare do we need to really, take leadership in? If it is Ayush-based healthcare, we can completely offer very interesting therapeutic solutions to the world. Where are we at this trajectory? If it is technology, we need to start thinking what are those aspects of technology, because we clearly have missed 2 buses. One is the artificial intelligence bus, and the other is the blockchain-based financial technology bus. We are trying to do certain catch-up, but strategically, China is very, very ahead. And I know, since I follow a lot of these startups, they are way ahead of the curve than what the Indian companies are. So if it is tech, we need to know what are those areas in tech in which we need leadership. Thirdly, if it is climate change and climate change-based technology, storage becomes an essential component of it, of the renewable energy dynamics. So we need to drastically push innovation fund, push all our focus of the state and its resources in pushing and finding and making India the home of storage needs, the battery storage needs of the world. If we can focus ourselves on these meta goals, I believe India will be better positioned to face the challenges in the post-COVID scenario. Barely looking at a reaction coming in because of Trump's pressure on the global supply chain, especially the Apples and the Ciscos, etc., moving away from US or from China is not going to be easy, because China is not going to sit in vacuum. China will also ensure that it will play around with its currency. It will ensure that more benefits are given to Apples and Ciscos of the world, and would want to retain those supply chains for itself. Therefore, India has to be much more proactive if it wants to win the geopolitical challenges that lie before us. And with that, I will conclude, and I'm open to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajatji. It was a real pleasure listening to you. I think you have covered all points. Ladies and gentlemen, Shri Jayant Sinha ji, Honorable Member of Parliament, Lok Sabha, was to join us for the webinar, but due to an unforeseen commitment, he could not be present here today. However, he was extremely kind to give exclusive time upon our request yesterday evening, and he spoke at length to me about the topic of the webinar and also answered few queries that we had received from the participants. We have that recording with us and shall play it post the Q&A. Interested participants could hear and benefit from it. We have received many questions from participants and many of them are common. I will be taking a few questions. The first question is from Dr. Ramesh Chand from PSR Government College, Bajnath for Ashwani ji. He says, do you think that China is diverting world's attention from COVID-19 investigation by deploying its military along the Ladakh region and the South China Sea? Ashwani ji, if you could please answer the query posed by Dr. Ramesh Chand. We are unmuting you, sir. Just a minute. We are unmuting you, sir. Just a minute. Yes, sir.
चीनी पहेली बड़ी मशहूर है कि सॉल्व करना मुश्किल होता है। चीन तरह तरह से लोगों को भरमाने की कोशिश करता है। शुरू से ही पहले दुनिया को ये भरमाते रहे कि हम लोग बहुत एफिशिएंट हैं, सस्ता सामान बेच रहे हैं, लेकिन आज अमेरिकन प्रेसिडेंट भी कह रहे हैं और भारत के लोग तो बहुत पहले से ही कह रहे थे कि ये सही नहीं है और आप हमारे इंडस्ट्री को तबाह कर रहे हैं। उसी तरह से जब जब भारत की तरफ से कोई एक्शन होता है, अभी ताइवान में हमारे 2 MP गए वहाँ, यानी वर्चुअली वहाँ के प्रेसिडेंट के वोट टेकिंग सेरेमनी में हिस्सा लेने के लिए, तो चीन समय समय पर इस प्रकार की गतिविधियां करता ही रहता है। लेकिन हमें समझना चाहिए कि आज चीन जो है वो सबसे, जिसको हम कहें कि वर्स्ट सिचुएशन में है, डिप्लोमेटिकली भी, इकोनॉमिकली भी, और जहाँ तक कोई भी युद्ध होता है उसमें दूसरे मुल्कों से कितना आपको समाधान मिलता है, कितना आपको सपोर्ट मिलता है, वो भी बहुत मैटर करता है। और हम जानते हैं कि इस समय डिप्लोमेटिकली चाइना इज एट इट्स वीकेस्ट पॉइंट, इसलिए चाइना कुछ भी करे वो ध्यान तो डाइवर्ट कर ही रहा है दुनिया भर का, लेकिन दुनिया भी बहुत होशियार है, भारत की लीडरशिप भी बहुत समझदार है। तो मुझे लगता है कि ये अभी कल मैं एक पैनल डिस्कशन में था जिसमें हमारे पूर्व सुरक्षा सलाहकार MK नारायण जी भी थे। उनका कहना है कि ये सब ऐसे ही करते रहते हैं, कभी युद्ध नहीं करेंगे, यानी युद्ध की संभावना ही नहीं है। तो हमें समझना होगा कि वास्तव में चीन की इन सब गतिविधियों से अलग हमें विचार करना पड़ेगा कि कैसे हम चीन को इकोनॉमिकली डाउन करें। आज दुनिया भर में चीन के खिलाफ एक बहुत बड़ा माहौल बना हुआ है। मैं यहाँ ऑडियंस को बताना चाह रहा था कि शायद वो विषय आए या ना आए, कि एक बहुत बड़ी परियोजना लेकर के चीन आगे बढ़ा, बेल्ट रोड इनिशिएटिव। 67 मुल्क उसमें शामिल हो गए और ऐसा लगने लगा कि पूरी दुनिया के इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पर चीन जो है वो छा जाएगा। भारत ने इसका शुरू से विरोध किया, अमेरिका ने भी टैसिटली भारत की सपोर्ट की, लेकिन कोविड के बाद पूरी दुनिया में उसके खिलाफ एक माहौल जो बना है, मुझे नहीं लगता किसी भी हालत में वो चीन अपने इस इरादों में सफल हो पाएगा। चीन का जो अगला अटेम्प्ट था, एक मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में एक लिमिट क्रॉस करने के बाद, उसका अगला अटेम्प्ट था दुनिया भर के इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पर कब्जा करना और स्ट्रैटेजिकली उनके स्ट्रैटेजिक पॉइंट्स पर कब्जा करना। जैसे उन्होंने श्रीलंका के हम्बनटोटा का पोर्ट पर कब्जा किया। तो कुल मिलाकर के चीन को एक बहुत बड़ा धक्का लगने वाला है उसके इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के प्लान्स में भी, और जिस प्रकार से डिफरेंट देश जो हैं उनको अपने इंपोर्ट्स को कम करने वाले हैं उनसे। आज जिस प्रकार से चीन में अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट की हालत है, मुझे लगता है कि अब उससे अगली क्राइसिस चीन को फेस करनी पड़ेगी, अपराइजिंग ऑफ द डेमोक्रेटिक मूवमेंट्स ओवर देयर। तो कैसे उन सब चीज़ों से ये हुक्मरान बच पाएंगे चीन के, चाहे वो कैसा भी ध्यान डाइवर्ट करते रहें, आगे राह आसान नहीं है चीन के लिए, ये हमें समझना पड़ेगा। तो इतना सा बताना चाह रहा था.
Ji sir, thank you so much. Another very interesting question is from Gaurav Sharma, who's from Royal Bank of Scotland, and he is asking, can India replace China as a global supplier? I think Rajat sir can take this question. We are unmuting you, sir. Just a minute.
Yeah. No, so it's a good question. I think India has all the building blocks to replace China and be the global suppliers of the world, barring a few access to few rare earth metals, which China has a ubiquitous control over. I believe other than that, we are fairly positioned. Also, we need to understand that textile was one area which at least a decade back allowed a lot of people job opportunities in India. And right now, India is increasingly losing that advantage. That advantage has moved to Vietnam and to Bangladesh. Bangladesh got a lot of trade-based advantages from Europe because it qualifies under these certain LDC norms, etc. And Bangladesh duties were far lesser. But clearly that has come out as a big disadvantage for India. So we need to start looking at sector by sector and coming out with very detailed roadmap as to how do we target to bring supply chains into India. And this is where under the leadership of the Prime Minister, a lot of state governments for the first time are putting their top ministers behind understanding what do these firms want, what reforms they require, what aspects of land do they require, and meeting their immediate goals. Only then we will be able to unleash this hidden potential that India has to be the world's global suppliers. We also know that certain pitfalls which happened, especially with Foxconn and Taiwan. Foxconn is situated in Taiwan, and I visited Taiwan as part of a tier 1.5 based group which was sent from India to understand how can Taiwan assist, because Taiwan is clearly in antagonistic situation with PRC. How can Taiwan assist India in taking tech-based leadership in having electronic supply chains well within India? And a big proposal came in from Foxconn to set up a huge factory in Maharashtra. That was around in 2015. But because of lots and lots of factors, and I can go on why did it happen, but we were never able to successfully put that factory in place. And if we are not allowing such opportunities to grab them by both the hands, we will keep missing opportunities. So I think it is time when the state leadership, not just the center, it's the state leadership which have to be very, very agile in order to grab certain opportunities which will come our way in the very near future. Thank you.
Right, sir. Thank you for answering that question for us. Another question is from Ritambara Upadhyaya from Punjab University, Chandigarh. She's asking, what measures should the Indian government take to encourage indigenous industries for Atmanirbhar Bharat? I think Ashwani ji has answered this question partly in his address also. But sir, I would like to if you can satisfy the query.
You see, it's very easy to be Atmanirbhar, but provided the people of this country and the government they work in hand, and we had always been Atmanirbhar in India, but in the last few years we have seen our dependence on the rest of the world has increased because of the unfair trade practices by the rest of the world, especially China. So what we have to do is we have to adopt various measures. I'm not saying that we should disregard our agreement with WTO. For example, we have a bound rate of 40% tariff, whereas we impose the applied rate is hardly 10%, 9.75% to be exact. So we can very well increase the tariffs, and we have studied the cost structure of Indian industry, and we found that despite all those illicit practices adopted by the Chinese, the difference between the the landed price of Chinese products and Indian made products is hardly 4 to 5%. So if we impose a little higher duty, for instance, we impose a duty, increase the duty from 10% to 20%, we could reduce the trade deficit by $10 billion, whereas the trade deficit was increasing by $10 billion every year. It was reduced by $10 billion in just 1 year. So we can understand that by adopting a judicious mix of tariff and non-tariff measures to control imports, our domestic industry can really pick up. We have to do hand holding of the small scale industries, and we have seen in the past also. I'm not saying we need to simply disregard or we push out the multinational corporations. In fact, all these multinational corporations which are coming into India, Rajat would be happy to know that generally we are against multinationals coming to India, but in present scenario, we are saying that yes, we can welcome these companies provided three conditions are met. One, that they should not over dependent on our domestic markets. They should come here for exports, as they are doing it in case of China. We know more than 50% of the Chinese exports come from the multinational companies working over there. Secondly, and they should come they come for exports only. Secondly, we need to impose domestic content requirements on them. We have seen in case of manufacturing sector, 50% of our manufacturing is now coming from automobile sector. And this has happened because of the domestic content requirement imposed on the foreign automobile manufacturers and the ecosystem which has developed in India. So domestic content requirement and the export obligations, these are the standard conditions being imposed throughout the world on FDI. So we are not going to do something very different from what other countries in the world are doing. Thirdly, we can we can impose another condition that today there is no cap on the royalty outflow by these multinational corporations. And in 2009, the government had lifted the then UPA government had lifted the cap on royalty. Today we are sending off more than $20 billion in the form of royalty and technical fees. So we can say these companies, we can tell, okay, you are most welcome, but not for royalty and technical fees, not for looking at our domestic domestic market, and not to do only the assembly part here. You have to make use of the domestic contents. So under these conditions, I think the time is now of India, and we cannot live without having relations with the rest of the world. But yes, these relations should be based on our requirements, our conditions, and what we can adopt the technologies also according to our needs. So Atmanirbhar Bharat is not a very distant dream. It is very much possible.
Thank you, sir. I think we had the best of both worlds today. Ladies and gentlemen, now we shall play a small video recording of Jayant Sinha sir, who gave me an interview yesterday. So we are just playing the video. Please enjoy.
Few questions from the registered participants. One of them is from Dr. Ajay Kumar Pandya of Amity University, Gurugram. He says that since 1991, we have been made to believe that globalization will lead us to prosperity. However, in the way things are shaping up now, countries are looking inwards and local supply chains are taking prominence. So he asks, what is the future of globalization and free trade in this current situation?
So globalization is still the path towards prosperity.
Yes,
There is no
yes.
doubt about that, because basic economics tells us that the theory of comparative advantage, that each country should do what it is good at doing. And in doing so, if it trades with other countries, both countries become more prosperous. So that is a very basic aspect of economics, and that has been proven to be empirically true. The theory has been proven to be empirically true over hundreds of years. So globalization does make a huge difference. And of course, India has benefited a great deal from globalization since we liberalized 30 years ago in 1991. So India has been a very big beneficiary of globalization, as we can see in the way that GDP per capita in India has grown over the last 30 years. So we benefited from globalization. Now, with the pandemic, as I said, we're going to move to a somewhat different form of globalization, a more fragmented form of globalization, which we are calling gated globalization. And certain countries will find themselves within these gated communities, and others will find themselves out of these gated communities, because ultimately globalization in the past era, pre-COVID, was based on certain rules. And what has been shown over and over again is that this rules-based global order has not held up very well. Some people have followed the rules, others have actually not followed the rules. And those that have not followed the rules, those that have tried to utilize globalization to their advantage, are now going to find that other countries are less willing to play along with that, to be vulnerable to those, and to see a more fragmented type of globalization. And for India, what's very important is that we are within the gates, within these communities, and that we forge good, strong relationships with important trading partners like the European Union, like the UK, like the US. Meenalji, you want to ask the next question?
Yes, sir, definitely, sir. The next question is from Mr. Siddharth Srivastava from this consulting firm, McKinsey. Recently, Honorable Prime Minister has made his pitch for vocal for local. So what are the major challenges that you foresee for local manufacturers? How will they be able to meet the challenge of manufacturing high quality products at competitive prices?
Well, those are obviously the important questions for us as we seek to expand our presence in global supplies and become more competitive, particularly in manufacturing. And as the Honorable Prime Minister also said, that we have to work on land, labor, liquidity, and law, the 4 Ls as he called it. We have to work on each of these production inputs, these factors of production, and ensure that for each one of them, we are as competitive as possible. So if the inputs are competitive, we will be able to command competitive prices and be able to compete. And so a number of the steps that the government has taken recently and also in the reform package has been to address these factors of production. Certainly there are things that are going on with respect to labor law, as you know, within certain states, as well as far as the government is concerned. Liquidity has been created in very ample measure by the Reserve Bank of India and through the Ministry of Finance to ensure that sufficient credit and liquidity is available. In addition, as far as large areas where industries can come in and get started, and then as far as laws are concerned, there are continuous efforts to streamline the laws that are on the statute books, the regulations that are out there, so that ease of doing business, which has been a very important priority for the government, is maintained. So these are the factors of production. For each one of them, there is a very clear strategy and a very clear set of metrics that we're working towards to be able to make it easier to do business in India, to do manufacturing in India, and make India very, very globally competitive and very much a part of various global supply chains.
Right, sir. Sir, this is for localization and manufacturing of local products and consumption, increasing the consumption of local products. And on the other hand, the government has been promoting policies and taking up several measures to increase the foreign investment in India and invite companies to start manufacturing here in India. So do you see any contradiction here? Because there are people think that there is a contradiction here, and if the companies are coming here from other countries and manufacturing here, of course they would like to be selling here also. So what are your views on this?
Meenalji, global and local are two sides of the same coin. because what we really want is, as far as local is concerned, that products and services are manufactured here in India, and that they are done in a way that makes them genuinely globally competitive. After all, a car that is manufactured in India or a smartphone that is manufactured in India cannot be 30, 40, 50% more expensive than it would be if it was manufactured, let's say, in Vietnam. So we have to make sure that everything that's manufactured locally is globally competitive. So that's on the local side. Now, the global side of the coin is that we need India to be an attractive destination for investments so that the best companies in the world can come to India, invest in India, and manufacture and produce in India. So if we do that and then our goods are locally competitive, like that car or that smartphone is competitive locally and globally, then India can also serve as an export hub. And the smartphone that is made in India then gets exported to Nigeria as well. So when we say we are global and part of global supply chains, we mean on the one hand, which is on the one side of the coin, the smartphone that is made in India is at a very competitive price. It's bought in India at high volumes. People use it and like it. And then on the other side of the coin, because that smartphone is being sold in high volumes, its prices are low, it can be exported to countries like Nigeria or Indonesia or Vietnam and purchased there as well. And that's the global side of it. So whether you're talking local or global, it's the same coin that we are talking about, and that coin is fundamentally around competitiveness. And we have to be competitive both for local products and services as well as for global exports if we want to be part of global supply chains, which the Honorable Prime Minister spoke about. And so that our people can find jobs, they can find good, high quality, well-paying jobs. So competitiveness is the key to all of this. And I'll just add one more aspect to this, which is sustainability. Even as we are being competitive, we also have to be sustainable. And sustainable, I mean that in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, which include, of course, health, which include gender and other forms of equality and inequality, which includes, obviously, climate change. So we not only have to be competitive in energy, we also have to be sustainable. And this whole process of getting to the global production frontier and being as competitive as possible, while at the same time being sustainable, will be a unique development model for India, a development model that no other country has followed before. And I have written extensively about it, and I call that getting to the green frontier. Frontier because it's competitive, it's at the production frontier, and green because it has to be sustainable. Green is the color of sustainability. So India's development model has to be one where we get to the green frontier. And rather than following a development model which has been farm to factory, which is the way China and many other countries have developed, we have to follow a development model where we're going farm to frontier. So we move people from agriculture to the most competitive, most sustainable industries possible. That development model is India's long-term development model, farm to frontier, and India has to get to this green frontier.
And sir, you really explained this very well, the point, and this is an often asked question from students and from different quarters. One last question that I want to ask.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for patient hearing. Sorry for the echo. I hope you enjoyed listening to Dr. Shri Jayant Sinha Ji, Honorable Member of Parliament, Lok Sabha. So now we have come to an end of this webinar, and it is my proud privilege to thank the esteemed speakers, Shri Jayant Sinha Ji, Shri Ashwani Mahajan Ji, Shri Rajat Sethi Ji, who kindly agreed and made this webinar an immense learning experience for everyone. And Rajat sir agreed on a very short notice. My special thanks to him also. My heartfelt thanks to our Honorable Chairman, Sir Dr. R.K. Tandon, respected Dr. Barkha Bahal Ma'am, Director of Trinity Institute, and Professor K.K. Geeta, Principal Law Department, for encouraging us to organize this webinar. I also express my gratitude to all my colleagues, especially Dr. Mukta, Dr. Romika, Mr. Sahil, Mr. Anmol, and all faculty members of my department for helping me organize this event. My special and heartfelt thanks to Dr. Subhash Sharma sir, Director of CEPR, who supported me immensely. Last but not the least, I have immense gratitude for all participants and my students who have attended this webinar. Thank you all for being here with us.